Hi, Reddit. I'd like to tell you. I'm 32 years old, and I've been holding on to a secret that wasn't even mine to keep for nearly 2 decades. A secret that my mom swore would destroy a family if it ever got out. But honestly, it was already destroying me. The simple fact is that my mom, Sarah, had an affair about a year before she met my dad, leading to a pregnancy that she kept hidden from everyone but her best friend. That pregnancy resulted in my half-sister Claire. Claire was adopted by a couple who lived a few towns over, and my mom got back on track, met my dad, and had me a few years later. For 15 years, it was just a whispered, painful history, something she only told me when I was 17, right before I left for college, making me promise on everything I held sacred that I'd never ever breathe a word to anyone, especially not my loving, unsuspecting father. I only found out because a distant relative accidentally let slip a detail about a baby that wasn't, and I pressed my mom until she broke down and told me the whole sordid story, including the crucial detail that she knew the name of the adoptive family and still quietly checked in on Claire's life from a distance. The thought of this hidden person, this literal sister out there, became a constant heavy weight in my chest, a ghost at every family dinner, and I started thinking about her more and more as I got older, wondering if she knew, wondering what her life was like, and whether she felt a similar nagging emptiness. The urge to find her and just talk became overwhelming. That secret didn't just stay in my chest, it grew roots. Every time my mother, Sarah, would talk about how wonderful and perfect our family was, I'd look at her and just feel this sharp spike of betrayal. Not for myself, but for Claire. Claire was out there somewhere, completely in the dark, and my mother was living this pristine lie, enjoying her ideal life with my unsuspecting father. The final straw came during a particularly bad period in my own life, a rough breakup, and losing my job all in the same month. Feeling completely adrift and alone, I realized I needed a tether, a connection outside the bubble of my immediate family, and the thought of having an older sister, someone who shared my blood, became an obsession. I knew the adoptive parent's last name and general location from my mother's earlier breakdown, and with the help of social media and a few late nights of truly creepy internet stalking, I found her, Claire. She looked so much like a younger version of my mom, which was a huge, unsettling confirmation. She was a nurse, recently married, and lived a quiet, seemingly happy life. I debated for weeks about what to do, drafting and deleting countless messages. Should I be subtle? Should I just come right out and say it? I eventually settled on a vague, slightly panicked email, pretending to be a genealogy enthusiast who'd found a strange, compelling connection between our families, just testing the waters and seeing if she'd bite. I hated the deceit, but I was terrified of being dismissed as a lunatic. The anxiety was a physical weight, making it hard to breathe every time I clicked on her profile, knowing I was about to drop a grenade into this woman's peaceful existence. I expected Claire to ignore the vague email, or maybe report it as spam, but I got a reply 3 days later. It was short, polite, and cautious. She said she was intrigued by my genealogy research and asked for more specifics about the supposed connection, mentioning that she'd always been a little curious about her background, but had never pursued it actively out of respect for her adoptive parents. This reply threw me into a fresh panic. Now I had to decide: keep up the flimsy pretense or drop the bomb. I knew if I tried to drag it out, she'd eventually figure out I was lying about the genealogy club and shut me down completely. I spent a sleepless night staring at the ceiling, feeling the full weight of my mother's decades of fear pressing down on me, but the thought of letting this chance slip away was unbearable. I typed out a long, rambling message, deleting and rephrasing paragraphs until my head hurt. I confessed that I wasn't a researcher, but a woman named Claire, and I said I had reason to believe we were related through our biological mother, my mom, Sarah. I explained that I knew it was a huge shock, that I understood if she never wanted to speak to me again, but that I felt a powerful, undeniable need to reach out because the truth deserved to be known by both of us. It was messy, emotionally raw, and probably way too much information for a first contact, but it was honest. I hit send and immediately wanted to throw my laptop across the room, feeling this awful combination of relief and sheer terror, knowing I had just permanently altered the landscape of two families, possibly for the worse, all without telling the one person who would be most furious: my mother. The silence after sending that truth bomb email to Claire was deafening, stretching out for 4 agonizing days. I kept checking my inbox every 5 minutes, my stomach twisting with every notification, half praying for a reply and half hoping I could rewind time and undo the whole disastrous move. I couldn't concentrate on anything. My own life felt utterly insignificant compared to the explosion I'd just set off in hers. Finally, on the morning of the 5th day, an email arrived. The subject line was just her name, Claire, and my heart hammered against my ribs so hard I thought I might pass out. I clicked it open, bracing myself for accusations, rejection, or maybe a threat to call my mother, Sarah. But it was none of those things. Claire simply asked for proof. She wrote that she'd always felt a small piece of her history was missing, but that this was such an enormous claim that she needed tangible evidence before she could even process it. She asked for specific dates, names of the towns involved, and most crucially, a photo of my mother from that time period, saying she needed to see if there was any resemblance to the little bit she knew about her birth mother. This request felt like an immense relief, a small crack of light in the darkness. It showed she was considering it, not instantly dismissing me, and that she needed validation, not hostility. But getting a photo of Sarah from 20 years ago without raising suspicion was going to be an Olympic-level feat of espionage. Getting that old photo of my mom, Sarah, turned into a high-stakes internal spy mission. I knew her stash of old albums was in the dusty back corner of the attic, tucked away in a cedar chest my father never touched. My dad was conveniently away for the weekend on a golf trip, leaving just me and Sarah in the house, which felt both like a huge opportunity and a massive risk. I waited until after dinner, when Sarah was engrossed in one of her ridiculously long crime procedural shows, and crept upstairs. The attic air was thick and smelled of mothballs and forgotten memories. I found the chest, the hinges creaking loud enough to wake the dead, and started rifling through decades of carefully curated family history, my childhood birthdays, family vacations, my parents' wedding. I was looking for photos from the year before she met my dad, a very specific dark chapter of her life. Finally, deep in a box labeled Early 90s, I found an album with loose pictures. There she was, a younger, sadder version of Sarah, looking beautiful but undeniably guarded. I slipped one specific undated photo of her looking straight into the camera, a candid shot taken at a picnic, looking just slightly haunted, into my pocket. As I was closing the chest, a small loose envelope fluttered out. Curiosity getting the better of me, I opened it. Inside were not photos, but two documents, a copy of a birth certificate with Claire's original name and my mother's name listed as the biological parent, and a neatly folded official-looking document detailing the terms of a closed adoption. Seeing the actual papers, the tangible proof that Sarah hadn't just told me the story, but had kept the documents hidden away, made the whole thing feel monumentally real, and my hands started to shake, realizing the depth of the deception. The envelope containing the adoption papers and the original birth certificate was now burning a hole in my pocket, and the photo of a young, guarded Sarah felt like a weapon. The level of detail in those documents was overwhelming, confirming everything my mother had told me, and much more. It wasn't just a secret. It was a completely separate, fully documented history that she had buried alive. I knew I couldn't hold on to this physical proof. If Sarah discovered those papers missing, she would know instantly what I was up to, and the fallout would hit me before it ever reached Claire. I went straight to my computer, scanned the photo and the documents in high resolution, and composed the most terrifying email of my life. I attached the proof and wrote to Claire that this was everything I knew, that the choice was entirely hers now about how to proceed, and that I would support her no matter what she decided, whether she wanted to try and meet, or if she needed to never speak to me again. Hitting send this time felt final, like stepping off a cliff. I deleted the original email drafts, cleared the history on the scanner, and carefully replaced the photo and the documents exactly where I found them in the attic chest, hoping the dust disturbance wouldn't be noticeable. I walked downstairs feeling simultaneously lighter, having finally released the truth, and heavier, knowing I had just fundamentally shattered the illusion of my mother's perfect life. My heart ached for Claire, who was right now opening an email that would likely redefine her entire sense of self, and for my dad, who remained innocently oblivious to the web of lies his wife had maintained for decades. I didn't hear back from Claire for 3 excruciating days after I sent the evidence. I was convinced she was either too stunned to reply, or worse, that she had gone straight to my mother, Sarah. The tension in my own home was thick, purely from my own anxiety. Every time Sarah looked at me, I felt like she could see the truth written across my face. On the fourth day, I finally got the email. It wasn't a demand or an accusation, but a simple request for a phone call. I knew this was it. The truth had officially landed. When I called her, Claire's voice was incredibly shaky, but clear. She didn't sound angry at me, just profoundly sad and disoriented. She confirmed that the documents and the photo matched the few hazy details she'd heard over the years about her own closed adoption, things her adoptive parents had only alluded to. She said she was trying to reconcile the woman in the photo, my seemingly perfect mother, with the person who had given her up and then chosen to live a lie. Claire wasn't ready to confront Sarah yet, but she needed to know everything about her, about the kind of person she was, and the kind of life she had built after the adoption. We spent hours on the phone that evening, me talking about my childhood, describing Sarah's personality, the little things she did, trying to paint a picture of the woman who was both her biological mother and the person who had kept her existence hidden. It was an incredibly emotional conversation, connecting two complete strangers through this massive shared secret. At the end of the call, she thanked me, saying that knowing the truth, even this painful version, was better than the emptiness she had felt her entire life. She ended the call by suggesting we meet in person the following week. The face-to-face meeting with Claire was everything I had secretly hoped for and feared. We met at a quiet coffee shop in a town halfway between us, and the moment I saw her, it was like looking into a mirror warped by 2 decades of different experiences. We ordered terrible coffee, and for the next 3 hours, we just talked. We found out we both have the same ridiculous laugh, the same weird obsession with true crime podcasts, and even the same small crescent-shaped mole on our left elbows. It was surreal, finding this immediate, undeniable connection. Claire was still hurting, grappling with the knowledge that her adoptive life was built on a deliberate omission, but she kept thanking me for telling her the truth, saying she finally felt complete. That evening, driving home, I felt a deep sense of peace I hadn't realized was missing, but it was overshadowed by the looming dread of my mother, Sarah. I knew I couldn't keep this new, massive relationship a secret forever, especially since Claire was ready to take the next step and contact Sarah herself. The universe, however, decided to handle the timing for me. 2 days later, my mother walked into the kitchen looking pale and holding the little blue envelope from the attic, the one with the adoption papers. She hadn't discovered them missing. She had just randomly decided to look through that old chest for an unrelated thing. She stared at me, the question in her eyes not needing to be asked. I didn't lie. I just looked her in the eye and said, "Claire knows. She knows everything, and we've met." The mask of the perfect mother shattered right there. The explosion was immediate and terrifying, a torrent of tears, shouting, and accusations about betrayal and destroying the family. She screamed that I had taken her choice away and ruined her life with my father. I stood there and took it, feeling immense guilt, but also a fierce protectiveness over Claire and the truth. Update. The aftermath. It's been 2 months. My father still doesn't know the whole truth, though my parents' marriage is hanging by a thread. He just knows Sarah is devastated about some old trauma that has resurfaced. I haven't told him because, frankly, I don't know if he deserves to have his entire life upended by a truth that isn't really about him. My relationship with my mother is currently frozen. She won't speak to me unless necessary. But the important thing is that Claire and I are still talking, texting constantly, and we've met 3 times now. She recently sent a short formal letter to Sarah asking for an explanation, but hasn't received a reply yet. Finding my sister has been the most beautiful, messy, and complicated thing I've ever done. I am constantly questioning if I was justified in breaking that promise to my mother and shattering her careful lie. But then I see the genuine happiness in Claire's eyes when we're together, and I know I did the right thing for the 2 people who deserve the truth. So, Reddit, I guess I have to ask, AITA for destroying my mother's perfect life to give my half-sister the truth she deserved?